women in Tamil women's magazines, beginning in the 1910s, maybe even a little bit earlier, were sort of making a claim that marriage has to have some kind of relationship to love and to affection and maybe even to kind of desire. And this might seem kind of normal to us today, but that was a fairly radical claim for its time, right? That we should actually privilege love in marriage, but secondly, that we should also evaluate the quality of a marital relationship on the basis of, whether it's loving or not, or whether it's based on affection or kind of anbu in the Tamil term. And so I started looking at these magazines, and the earlier magazines were very much, the Tamil ones as well, just like the others that were in North India, were very much focused on kind of creating a wife who one could love, right? Who could be a companion to her husband. So the earlier magazines were very much around this kind of mode of appropriate domesticity. But over time, by the 1920s and 30s, this started to change to talk more about how does marriage need to change in order to become loving. So rather than how should the woman be lovable, it becomes how does the marriage become a space of love? And I think there's a lot of reasons for this. I think some have to do with kind of the rise of an all-India women's movement that's making claims for women's rights. I think the Dravidian nationalist arguments around anti-caste and anti-ritual kind of open up a space to talk about loving relationships or affectionate relationships among people. So there are multiple different reasons, but ultimately love and affection become sort of sources or places to critique existing practices. So how do you decide if something like dowry, for instance, is a bad idea? Well, you say, look, it really messes with people's emotions. It doesn't enable people who want to marry. And so dowry is a bad custom. So that's just one example, right, of how this kind of emotional discourse about marriage creates a foundation or a framework or a logic around which you can critique a whole range of other practices. And this shows up a lot in women's writing.